I'll give you a couple basic tips right now. Number one is triple the length of each of your descriptions for each of your jobs. Number two is include more metrics than you were including before. Number three is to recast your entire profile so it looks more like a straight line. I know every single one of you guys has had a jagged career. You spent 6 years in e-commerce, and then you spent 6 years in fintech, and then you spent 3 years in B2B SaaS. But what do you want to do next? You want to do B2B SaaS? Perfect. Talk about how you have become a B2B SaaS product leader in your headline. Talk about how all of your experiences lead up to you becoming a good B2B SaaS leader in your About Me.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Knight, and on each episode of this podcast, I'll be having conversations with the brightest and best minds I can find to help inspire all of us to make amazing products, amazing product teams, and amazing product companies. If you like the sound of that, why not head over to onenightinproduct.com where you can sign up for the newsletter, check out some of my other episodes with thought leaders and practitioners, and find the podcast on your favorite podcast app or YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can make sure you never miss another episode again. And do make sure to tell all your friends. On tonight's episode, we go deep on the product leadership job search with one of the most popular product newsletter writers we've got and ask ourselves, what should we be prioritizing in our hunt? What types of companies should we go for? And is there a way to persuade business leaders to give us a chance when they're convinced that Bob from Facebook is a sure thing? For all this and much more, stick with us on One Night in Product. So my guest tonight is Aakash Gupta. Aakash is a product leader turned professional newsletter writer, the self-styled product growth guy, and according to the blurb on a recent book, he published the world's leading voice on product management. Now, I can already hear the crowd grumbling on that one. However, the numbers don't lie, and Aakash has amassed over 206,000 followers on LinkedIn, which means if you combine Aakash and me, we've both got over 206,000 followers on LinkedIn. Aakash is a keen rock climber who's climbed in 6 continents, but he's here tonight to talk all about ascending to the summit of your product leadership career and the types of ropes and crampons you might need to get there. Hi, Aakash. How are you doing tonight?
Amazing. Yes. I have the great pleasure of been working with you for the last few days on a piece. Been so impressed with you.
Spoiler alert. Don't ruin it. We don't want to make people too excited too soon. You know, we never know what it's going to turn out like, but we'll try.
Well, for the audience's sake, I mean, I literally have a treasure trove of insights. Jason has probably interviewed like 15 experts in the topic we're writing about. So I'm literally like a kid in a candy store just watching these videos every day.
It's almost like that's my only talent. But anyway, first things first, you're incredibly popular on LinkedIn with more followers than just about anyone else in product management. You're spending your time mostly on your product growth newsletter. But for the uninitiated, and as we just discussed, we've got actually a surprisingly small overlap in our audiences. What sort of topics do you cover in that newsletter, and why should people subscribe to it?
Yeah, so if you saw my content maybe 2 years ago, you might have said, well, geez, there's a lot of, the basics, there's the what, there's the why of product management. These are the basic frameworks. Maybe you even unfollowed me back then. What I would say is that I listen to my feedback like anybody else. The first thing I did when I went full time is I talked to all of my haters on Reddit. I actually DM'd them just to figure out what they hated so much about me. And one of the first things they said is like talking about real experiences instead of basic generalities. And so what I do these days is I talk to actual people on the topics I'm writing about. And instead of just focusing on the what and why, I focus a lot on the how. And I think a lot of people try to shy away from the how question because product management is practiced so differently in different companies around the world. So what I really try to set out for myself is like, how do I understand the different pockets of how things are being done and describing those so that people can kind of get like a market research on any given topic. And those topics, I really love 3 things. So I love helping senior PMs succeed in their career. So, people with 2 to 3 years of experience, I think there's like a whole stream of content I have around that, like how you get better at wireframing, how you get better at PRDs. Then I have a stream of content around how product leaders can succeed. So a lot of this is like studying the product strategy of companies that are doing really well that you haven't already seen in Wired or you haven't seen in Forbes. So I recently wrote about Dovetail. That's a $960 million valued company. So it's kind of outside the realm of what the normal tech press is doing in deep dives. And then finally, I have the job search content. And this is simply because my readers kept asking me like, frick, I just got laid off. I haven't been laid off in my career. I have a 12-year career in product management. And I got so many of those messages over the last couple of years that I've spent a lot of time with job seekers on weekly calls, coaching them through the process. And now that I've seen roughly 45 people through, I've developed some of my own sort of generalized takes on the job search. And that's what I'm excited to talk about today.
Oh, absolutely. But on the one hand, anyone calling themselves, even in passing, the world's leading voice on product management is kind of setting themselves up a little bit to be mocked. But at the same time, you do have an audience. Although I will say, for the record, there is apparently a comedian called Aakash Gupta who's still got you way beat for followers. But you never know, maybe you'll get there one day. But anyway, what does being the world's leading voice, or more prosaically, just having the most followers, or certainly amongst the most followers in the product management community, what does that mean to you? I guess both from a validation perspective, but also the kind of responsibility that maybe that gives you as a commentator.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And something that I maybe realized later on as I was writing, which is like, you can't just put out there a half-baked idea, because there might be hundreds, thousands of people who are listening to your idea, and then it's either hurting their career or hurting the people that they work with. So I think that as followers have increased, I've basically just had to increase the bar on my content. I think a lot of people would realize this if they look at any YouTuber. Like that YouTuber, they started out with like daily content, similar with me. Like you saw those daily posts on different types of frameworks or daily threads. And now the posting cadence is lower. Like I have to increase the quality on anything. Usually, to be totally frank with everybody here, I put every single post into Claude Opus and I ask it, what would a VP of product who's really skeptical, like Jason Knight, dislike about this post? What would a VP of design who has worked for 25 years at Meta and hates everything that product managers say? Or, for instance, what Debbie Levitt would respond to this post about. And I ask it those questions because I've realized that it's not really worth putting out there something that is like my conjecture. Like when I was a product leader, actually, I think that I was rewarded for that, where people liked that I would come up with like just like a bold conjecture. Like when I was at ThreadUp, I was like, I would say stuff like, we simply don't research our solutions enough. We just jump right into whatever the executive team wants. And I said that straight to the executive team's face. But if I just want to say something hot take like that, that's a little bit more generalized, I have to be kind of cautious about it. So nowadays it's almost like hot take, maybe it's still the hook because we know that like that's the only thing that works on social media. But then right after that, it's like, here's the nuance around that hot take. So that's how my content has evolved. And in terms of calling myself the leading voice, it makes me laugh that I put that on there because the book, I think a lot of people put like so much time into their books. And so maybe I like set the wrong standard. The book for me, those job seekers, those very same job seekers who are reaching out to me and being like, my life is ruined. Like I have a mortgage payment. I might have to move out of New York City. Like people were saying that to me, especially about this time last year. They were saying like, I just can't get through your freaking long blog posts. They're all saved in my email inbox. You have like 20,000 words in your blog posts. I have like 17 saved emails and I haven't been able to get through them. But I love highlighting and marking up books. So my book, basically it was like a 2-week push where I didn't post any newsletter posts. And I read a bunch of articles on how to like write a title of a book, how to like edit a book. I sent it to a couple people to edit. And then I packaged up a lot of what's in the newsletter in the book for people who want to read it on paper. So it's almost like a paper form of my newsletter. And I think the number one, I think one of my editors, this person is like an expert in book covers. They basically said that you have to make like a world's greatest type of claim. And so I think the way we back that up is just by saying that of product managers, I have the most followers on LinkedIn. On X, of course, Shreyas Doshi has like double. So just looking at LinkedIn, having the most followers. But I wouldn't say I'm the leading voice. Everybody knows that Marty Cagan is still the leading voice. He's been doing it the longest. You may hate him, you may love him, but you know what his takes are. And then there's Shreyas, there's Lenny. So there's so many other people that are in the pantheon. I wouldn't actually even close to consider myself a leading voice. But I consider myself probably the hardest working researcher in the product management content space, which is to say that, I'm putting out there, and you can see as we're working together, 50 hours a week into deeply researched posts. And that's what I'm sharing with my audience.
So would you say, without wishing to be too provocative, that in many ways, there's almost an aspect of being a reporter, or as you say, a researcher, but almost like being the lowest lane of product management. You're kind of there. You want to get the story. You want to speak to the
100%.
people. You want to get the takes. But I know that when you and I spoke a few days ago about some of this stuff and kind of prepping for this and prepping for the stuff that we're doing together, you kind of flippantly to some extent said, oh, I don't get to do product work anymore. That's just, I'm just doing all of this stuff. But of course, at the same time, a lot of the stuff that you're doing to grow your newsletter, and, it's a paid newsletter as well, or it certainly can be. So there's a lot of product work going in there. So do you feel that whilst you're not necessarily kind of quote unquote in the craft anymore, which could be a claim that could be leveled at someone that's spending all of their time researching and writing newsletters, you're not doing the day-to-day product management in a company, but that you still kind of feel connected enough to the craft because you are A, speaking to all these people, but B, you're having to practice some of this growth stuff on your own product of your newsletter?
Yeah, exactly. I think that, the way I think about my product is that there's marketing, there's social media, LinkedIn, X, Threads, Substack notes, Substack recommendations, Google SEO. So there's kind of like these 6 channels. And I look at them just like any product leader does. Every, morning, usually, I just look at the metrics on how many views, how many then clicks, and on social media, then how many profile conversions once they land on my profile to visiting my newsletter. And then on my newsletter homepage, from that newsletter homepage to actually becoming a free subscriber. And then from a free subscriber to becoming a paid subscriber. And as everyone knows, the metric that actually drives my business, staying a paid subscriber. And so then I look a lot at like what my retention cohorts are doing, how those retention cohorts are doing by acquisition source. If I acquire you via a viral thread about Barbie's marketing that gets 60 million views on Twitter, it turns out you stay with me for 2 months. If I acquire you via a series of LinkedIn posts where you were a free subscriber for 6 months first, it turns out you never unsubscribe. So I have then adjusted my strategy to reach that. And so I do try to use the data. And then I have, anytime somebody paid unsubscribes from a newsletter, which I'm sure you'll do once your free trial ends, those people get a message like, I'll give you like $15 Amazon gift card if you come chat with me about your experience with the newsletter. And so then I'm learning a ton more about everybody who's unsubscribing from my newsletter as well. So I am trying to bring like the data and user insights and treating it like a product. But I want to be honest with everybody, it is not product work still. Because when I do something like, let's say I recently turned off free paid post preview and turned back on 7-day trials. I just looked at the turning on globally metrics, but there were a lot of confounding variables. Like I was really terrible at social media during the test period. I wasn't as focused. I was in Barcelona enjoying my life. So it wasn't like a true A/B test. And on top of that, there was no CEO at the end of the day asking me tough questions about it. There was no VP of sales saying, you completely forgot about the LTV of those customers, Aakash. The free paid post preview LTV is way better. I didn't even estimate the LTV. So there's still a lot of deficiencies with the way like a solopreneur will be doing these things because I'm optimizing for speed. So that's why I think it's absolutely critical that I not just do the reporting work, but that's why I also do the coaching work, because the coaching work helps me get really into what people are feeling and doing on a consistent basis. I found that like some of my insights around, for instance, how the VP of product job has been changing over the last 3 years, that only came because I've been talking to the same VP of product once a month for the last 14 months. And now I'm learning like how his job is changing, the pressures he's facing. So those are the 2 things I do that in reality keep me most connected to the work.
But I mean, and again, I agree with all of the points that you make around, there's definitely no CEO. You are the CEO. And that's an interesting point because you've kind of had to go all in on this because this is now your main source of income. It's your main gig. And it's basically become a job or the startup of you. And it wasn't always. Like you used to have work and you used to do this on the side. Like you say, maybe your takes were a little less well-researched, a bit hotter at the time, and you've doubled down and you've become that researcher. You've become the person that wants to go and do a good job. But does that change your relationship with content? Because, for me, if I don't want to do a podcast episode 1 week, or if I don't want to write a newsletter 1 week or any of those things, or if I just want to like I did the other week, just take a week off and not even go on LinkedIn at all. I can do that, and that has no effect on me at all because I've got lots of other sources of income that I work on. But this is your main thing. So does that make it harder, more enjoyable? Like, what's the relationship that you now have with the concept of content?
Yeah, I think that, what do they say? Like, pay somebody to do it if you want them to stop liking it. I think it's basically true because there's a lot of realities about writing content for me. One is, if a paid subscriber reaches out to me and I don't respond within 12 hours, they're basically going to churn. So I have to respond to everybody. And if anybody's ever worked with me, like that is not my strength. My strength is doing deep work. It is like carving out 6 hours to write a newsletter post. But now all of a sudden, like I have to literally every morning and every evening, I have to do customer support. I'm the customer support rep. Every morning I wake up to, some people totally shitting on my posts, which are just my marketing for my newsletter online. And I have to think about, okay, well, I've just woken up and I've gotten punched in the face like Mark Zuckerberg does every morning. Now, how do I want to handle this? Okay, I need to go take a walk. I need to go do some yoga. Okay, this is going to be my like response to this person. And so, yeah, I think that it would before, like, I didn't even have time to read the comments on my posts. I've found since like a post from a year ago where like everybody's disagreed with me, but it couldn't faze me less because I had a job to do. And the content was really, actually, most people probably feel this way who write content. The content was helping me in my job because I was crystallizing my thoughts. I would often be a parrot of my content. I would just say what I had written in my content 3 weeks earlier. It was kind of the Neil deGrasse Tyson view of the world. I didn't say anything unless I had written it before. And so my content was serving that role in my work to become kind of like a thought leader within my company. And now I have to basically coach senior PMs and product leaders in how to succeed in their job. And so it's a totally different thing. And I think that what I've done though, I've realized that that's how you take the joy out of the work, right? So what I've realized is how do I reconnect with the joy? And so what are the things that give me the most pleasure? Like 3 things. 1, having complete control over my schedule. So most newsletters, they have like a Tuesday, Saturday posting schedule. If you look at my newsletter, I just post when it's ready and I have a high quality bar. So some months I'm able to get out 12 deep dives. Some months I get out 4. It changes, but I kind of have that commitment to everybody that I will give you 1 deep dive a week and I will take off 4 weeks a year. So I have like complete control over my schedule. So that's why last week I could just be in Barcelona and it was amazing. Like I couldn't have done that as a VP of product because I would have so many more obligations. Like my CEO would be messaging me in American time zone. And if I wasn't responding in 30 seconds, I would be fricked. So there's all sorts of things like that where I have so much more control. The second thing is that I don't just have to work on what, the company has established. Like, oh, it's planning season now. Get ready to work 16 hours a day as you fix all of your team's roadmaps, or get ready to deal with all of the requests from VP of sales who thinks he's 100 times smarter than you. So I don't have to deal with that. Like the content is whatever I want to write about. Like the topic that you and I are about to write about, I just happen to be so interested in it because so many people have been asking me about it that I personally want to know all the answers to these questions. So I'm learning, like, that's why I love watching those videos that you've recorded. Like, I'm just learning so much about what I want to learn about. And I'm learning about it where there's no other content online. We're going to the source for the actual insights. So that is really, really exciting to me. And then the third thing is I basically determine my fate. Like I could have done this whole business on ads. In fact, like I get inbound of at least 5 or 6 advertisers every single day. So I could easily have done that. But what I like to do is this deep work, I've realized. And so I've sort of catered my life around this deep work. And the final component of catering my life is I don't take meetings all day. So you'll notice on my calendar that I have a meeting block in the morning and in the evening. That way I have this huge deep work block of 6 hours every single day where I just do deep work. And that to me is like amazing because obviously as a product leader, you rarely have more than a 30-minute block free on your calendar. So I've basically got like full control over my calendar. So that's how I've brought the fun back. But yeah, if you don't see me post on social media for 2 weeks, I was probably just burnt out from all the people hating.
Well, it just reminds me of the old argument about like Mick Jagger going up on stage and playing Satisfaction for like the 2000th time in his career, and like how fun can that really be? But at the same time, he has lots of other benefits from doing that. But again, like when you're in it, and I've never played at that level or anywhere even close, but even for me back in the day as a musician or wannabe famous musician, like going out there and like playing the same song 3 times in a row was frustrating, let alone having to kind of just keep going back to the well again and again and again. So I guess ultimately the long story short is we always find something to moan about when something happens, when we have to do something, but we also need to look at the good things. But let's talk about one of the posts that we're going to specifically deep dive into, double click into here, which is a relatively recent one that you did around the product leadership job search, which is obviously an important topic. But why did you decide to specifically work on that topic, and why now?
Yeah, there's 2 main factors of why work on that topic and why now. So the first is that having been a VP of product growth, LinkedIn started serving me up like director of product growth at Reddit, director of product management at Google, director of product management at Ramp, director of product at Netflix. And I was like, whoa, like if I was in the market, I would be interested in all 4 of those jobs. All 4 of those jobs have the type of compensation that I'm seeking now that I have kids and have a house, that all those jobs have the type of impact I'm seeking, the type of brand name I'm seeking. Like, whoa, like I haven't seen these for almost 2 years. Frankly, like none of these good jobs had been online. So one signal, like, okay. And then the second signal was that all these people I was coaching, a lot of them were getting jobs all of a sudden. Like they had been on the market for like 6 to 12 months and they were getting jobs. And so what I realized is like I wanted to wake everybody up who had been sitting on their hands in a job that was, 60% of what they wanted because, there's so many layoffs and first in, first out type fears, and say like, hey, pop your head out again. Like you can do it now. Like I know so many of you aren't, and we're going to figure out like how you can do it. And so when I was starting that process, Colin Lernell, who has been a 3-time senior director of product at a bunch of really cool companies like Patreon, Noom, and Udacity, he said like, I've read all of your job searching content, Aakash, and you completely underrate recruiters. And I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, because like you have a big audience, so you get a lot of inbound. But everybody else, they need to create connections with recruiters. And recruiters have access to product leadership jobs because product leadership jobs are unlisted. So the only way those jobs get filled is people reach out to people like you or recruiters reach out. So I realized that there's this entire channel around recruiters. And so those were kind of the factors that, okay, the market is changing. I'm seeing people get jobs. And oh, there's also this insight that I haven't written about. So that put it all together.
So you do talk in the post, and you just mentioned it then as well, this idea that the job search changes as you kind of go up, like as you become more senior. And that more and more, as you just said, of the best sort of senior roles aren't advertised at all. So does that mean that the ones that we do see out there, the ones that are advertised, are kind of the crappy ones that we shouldn't even be bothering to apply for? Or is that too simplistic?
Well, those are just the ones that we're all lucky enough that the company has decided to create a level playing field. But actually, one of the things that we did is we interviewed some hiring managers of those roles, and some of the hiring managers poo-pooed on those listings. They said, like, we already had our top 3 candidates in mind, or this listing is like an HR policy that every job has to be listed, or yeah, we didn't interview anybody who applied to the listing. We just went out to my own network. So that's like the harsh reality, is that those listings aren't very effective and they're not actually a good way to get into the job. But they do, because of certain policies or whatever reason, should represent like real jobs. And those 4 jobs that I just mentioned, I think all 4 of those jobs are actually excellent jobs. Like I don't think there's, especially the Ramp one, like you're talking about working with Geoff, who like is one of the best VPs of product out there. You're talking about working with the best, I think, founders and product team. Like they're shipping so fast. So that seems like an amazing job. So I would definitely not poo-poo on the jobs that are listed, but I would just say they're a very small fraction. So we like tried to hold people's feet to the fire And some of these recruiters who had started like multiple recruiting firms and had like 25, 30 years experience basically said like about 80% of your top executives, so your CPO, SVP, VP jobs are not online. So if you see like, let's say 2 online, you can expect that there are 8 more that are not posted. And then when you get to the number 2 leader, the SVP, the VP, it's like 50 to 80%. So if you see 10 jobs posted, there's actually 10 more out there that you don't see posted. And with the number 3 leader, like your senior director, your head of, it's like 30 to 20, 50%. So it drops quickly. And then when you get to that principal group product manager, almost all of these jobs are posted. So what that means is you can look at listings to track the state of the job market, but you need to put this multiplier on the listing depending on the level of the role to understand how many jobs truly are available.
It's like this whole stat about how much of the web is on the dark web, right? Like, so does that mean we should be going to the dark web to get all of our job listings, like the proper ones, or would that just be a complete waste of time?
Yeah, the dark web, meaning the informal network of people who actually fill these jobs. Yes.
Oh, so it's a different kind of dark web.
Yes, but it's just as many smoky rooms. And that's one of the insights that I probably didn't internalize as someone who communicates online so much. But all of the VPs of product that we talk to who do a good job of taking advantage of recruiters and VCs, they often did so in person. And they said that the strength of the ones in their local area as a result were the best. So like if you're in the Bay Area, just like don't do this over Zoom. Like I know it's a 2-hour drive from your North Bay $4 million mansion down to Silicon Valley, but it is worth that drive to go meet those recruiters. You know, they put up these events. They actually advertise these events a lot of times. They'll say like there's a Thursday happy hour at Diversa. You should go to that. And that's when you actually create the connections, because what happens is there's that happy hour, but then there's the smoky room afterwards, which is they invite you to the poker game, or they invite you for an extra drink, or they invite you to dinner. And that's when you build these relationships with people, and you can then capitalize on that relationship. And what almost everybody told me is that these relationships, they don't pay off immediately. They actually pay off like 1 to 3 to 5 years down the line. So you played poker with this guy for 3 months. Now, anytime he texts, emails, or calls you, you pick up and respond within an hour. Next time he has a role that's a perfect fit for you, you're who he thinks of first. That's how it actually works. So it is kind of a dark web in that a lot of people don't like to play that type of old school networking game. But that old school networking game is how the product leadership job search works.
But do you think this is something that is or could be generically applied across the entire globe? Or do you think, you just mentioned a lot around Silicon Valley, for example, and that's obviously, where a lot of the people go, but that's not where all of the people are. That's not where you are. So, like, where does this type of thing work best? I mean, Silicon Valley, sure, but I guess to flip it, where doesn't it work? Did you get any feedback from anyone that said, actually, in whatever market I'm in, that isn't the case, and actually you do need to just go through the front door? Or do you feel that it generically applies?
I actually think that it applies the least in Silicon Valley and New York. So those 4 jobs are all in Silicon Valley and New York. There are no other, I don't think you can find actually like right now a public director of product job in London, but there are at least like 50 openings in London. I don't think you'll see one in Bangalore, but there are at least like 35 openings in Bangalore. Same with Berlin. It's the same story. So actually Silicon Valley tends to be the most public and list them the most. Companies like Salesforce, actually they have a policy that every job has to be listed. So Salesforce just hired a CPO for Slack. Like I'm so excited to see who that person is. And you better bet I'm going to message them about how they got the job as soon as they announce, because I want to learn that. So I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have come through the listing, right? Like Salesforce, like Mark probably knew them and worked with them like 10 years ago, right? But that's like, it'll be interesting to see, and I'll let everybody know. So actually what I found is some really interesting anecdotes I'll share. One of the VPs of product we talked to moved back to El Salvador. And he said that everything in El Salvador is done through recruiting process outsourcing firms, RPOs. And so he got into the RPOs to find what jobs were open. And I was like, I didn't even know there were VPs of product in El Salvador. But of course, yeah, they have software companies too. So if you want to go into the smaller markets, actually your network is even more important. We talked to somebody in Nairobi and they were talking about how basically it's a small tech world over there. Almost everybody already knows everybody because, I think it's like Jumia and like, I forget what it's like, M-Pesa, like they basically just hire from each other. Everybody is hired from one another. And so they can just do a back channel reference to figure out like, hey, when you were at Jumia, who were the best product leaders? And that is the only set of people they even interview. They just reach out to all of them. So the world gets smaller the further away from Silicon Valley and New York City. So people might wonder, like, how did I get the job at Epic Games? So actually, like in the triangle, if you think about it, there were only like 3 companies that I was willing to work for. I ended up getting offers from all 3. And so how did I do that? Right? So I had to like literally go and build my network internally at each of those companies. I remember when I first learned that my wife was moving to Durham, North Carolina because she's an academic and she got a job at Duke University. The first thing I did is reach out to all of my friends of friends at these 3 companies. So I talked to like associate producer, a junior graphic designer. But what that did is that let me learn like what these companies care about, what products are actually driving revenue. Like from the outside, it's unclear like how important Unreal Engine is at Epic Games. If you talk to a single person, you'll realize like Unreal Engine is a $100 million business and Fortnite is a $6 billion business. Which one do you want to work on? It was like pretty obvious that I needed to go work on Fortnite. So then I needed to go network into the Fortnite people. Then I needed to make sure that the Fortnite product leadership saw me. So what I decided to do was like create some content because there's a huge content ecosystem around Fortnite and they noticed that content and they actually reached out to me on their own. So then I was able to create like an inception around that. So I would say that the smaller the market, the more you should actually think that these dark web strategies that we are calling them, these old school networking strategies, the more important those are.
All right. But you talk about trying to find these people, networking with these people. You've mentioned recruiters, you've mentioned investors, VCs. So who specifically should your go-getting product leader who's looking for a new job actually be going out to try and find? Like what types of recruiters, what types of investors, what types of VCs? Like, and who within those organizations, any specific kind of characteristics, like, are there specific targets that people should have in mind when they're looking to try and build that network and try and foster and nurture those relationships?
Yeah. So let me just break down the recruiter market because we did a lot of research on this market and then I'll tell you which categories to focus on. So there's like the Shrek firms that you guys have probably gotten DMs from in your LinkedIn. So check your history. Spencer Stewart, Heidrick and Struggles, Russell Reynolds Associate, Egon Zender, Korn Ferry. So these are your Shrek firms.
That's almost like you were reading it.
Yes, it was. These are your global executive search firms. So these all have like, a lot of these are public actually. So I like to look at their investor reports on a quarterly basis just to get a sense of how the job market is doing. That's one of the data points I track. Then there's like your mid-market search firms, like your True Search, Diverse, and Riviera. Those also would have reached out to you guys because these have like 100 to 1,000 people. Like in my experience, like when I looked at my inbox, like I had gotten like 4 or 5 pings from all of the firms I just mentioned. So if you've been a product leader for any length of time, like they're filling so many jobs that they're reaching out to most product leaders. Then there's your boutique recruiting firms. You probably haven't heard of these, but these are the ones you want to focus on. So these are like 5 to 50 people. And why these matter, like one of the funniest things that a VP of product said to me in the last piece was, I hate that you can talk to 8 people at Diversa and none of them have talked to each other. All of them have access to different roles. It's not as if it's even a company. And they're right. Like the way those companies work, they're almost like little fiefdoms. So there's like a partner who has like access to certain jobs. He has some associates and recruiters under him who have helping him with jobs, which he is farming out to them. And then they have like research associates who are doing org chart mapping and giving the recruiters lists. And those people reach out to you. So you get reached out to by a recruiter. What's interesting about a boutique recruiting firm is that your partner will be often having a full view of everything that the firm has, number one. Number two, they'll be doing a lot of the work themselves. So they'll actually like find somebody interesting, they'll back channel about that person interesting, and then they'll reach out. So those people's recommendations are really highly weighted in the mind of a hiring manager. And so if you build relationships with these people who have access to a fairly high number of jobs, you can succeed. So I know a couple people who know like 2 or 3 recruiters at these firms, and that has been their entire career, just those 2 or 3 relationships. Finally, you have your headhunters and your contingency firms and your recruiting process outsourcing firms. So those are like the 6 categories of the market and where I'd say you focus. Then you have your VCs. So in your VCs, again, you're going to have your giant VCs like your Sequoias, your A16Zs, your first rounds. Those companies have HR talent, like a VP of people or something like that. That's who you want to find at those companies. That person usually has a good view. They are usually working with a couple founders who are having trouble placing some key roles. And so their recommendation plays a lot. Then you have like your smaller VCs. So these are the ones who did the most effective for me. So whenever I was on a job search, I would I was interested in fintech, for instance. So I talked to a fintech VC, and the fintech VC was like such a fan of me that they would just be like, look at my whole portfolio and let me know which founders you want an intro to. And they would just intro me to all of those founders. And because the intro is coming from the VC, like the founder usually would respond within like 30 minutes and we'd just hop on the call the same day. So that's how I think about it in terms of VCs and recruiters.
So that all sounds fascinating. And, there's obviously lots for people to sort of dig into there and maybe start to plan out the types of people that they might want to go and find and introduce themselves to as well. And again, it's going to be different in different markets, different in different regions, different industries even. But you also talk in the post quite early on about compensation. And you boldly claim that this post might make you money. Which is brilliant. We all want money. But what trends on a broad level have you dug up about product leadership pay, how it scales with seniority, stage of company, maybe market as well? Like, where's the money going at the moment?
Yeah. So probably most people listening to this have heard of Nikhil Singhal because in 2021, he had like a very famous post where he posted what he called like tier 1 sort of compensation. And he mentioned like that it's been like relatively stable. So I'll just share those numbers with everybody because you probably saw that table once, and then I'll share like what the new data is. So he gave like a very interesting scenario to you, right? So let's say you're like a 20-year product leader experience. You have 4 options. You could be a director at Google. You could make 500K cash, 500K equity with 5-star benefits. You could be a vice president at a hyper-growth company. You could make 300K cash, 700K equity with 4-star benefits. Or you could be a chief product officer at a company that just found product market fit and make 225K cash, get 0.5% of the company with 3-star benefits. Or you could join a startup as a co-founder, get 100K cash and 50% of the company. So these are like the 4 options you can kind of think of as it relates to stage of company and how it affects sort of the key dynamics. So interestingly, in 2023, the first half of 2023, all those numbers were down. And everybody probably knows this because there was a flood of amazing product leaders on the market, all of whom had bloated their lifestyles and wanted to find a job quickly. Then in 2024, especially actually in late 2023, but now in the first 5 months of 2024, it has now reached a new high above what Nikhil had shared. So we looked at some just cold hard data from places like Carta, a Riviera Partners compensation report, which is linked in the piece as well. And so what they're finding is that like that VP of product that I mentioned, like the chief product officer at Product Fit, where I'd said 225K, the median cash right now is 390K. The equity is 0.25%. And the CPO of the Series B, the cash is 450K and equity is 1.75%. So it's a huge jump up from Nikhil's numbers as the market has just reignited. And that's because product management has had a tumultuous few years. Everybody listening knows that. But your VP range is actually, the company is looking at that versus VP of engineering and putting you like a little bit below that, but above VP of design, above VP of marketing and above VP of sales, actually. So they know like where that compensation range is of their VPs. And that's how the product VPs who are actually still getting hired are getting really good compensation. So that's the component around trend over time. We've talked about stage already. The final trend you mentioned is geography. So these numbers, they don't even apply to me because these are for high cost of living cities in the United States. So this is the high end of the high end. This is your LA, your SF, and your New York. And your Seattle. So it's basically just those 4 places. As you sort of like unwrap like how the pay goes down, you go to like your tier 2 and 3 cities in the United States. So places like where I am, like Raleigh, North Carolina. Then you go into like international hotspots. It's another step down, like London, where you are, or Berlin, or Bangalore. It's a step down. And then you go to like your just international tech places. Like if you're in Sofia, Bulgaria, or something like that. There are plenty of VP of products there, but they're earning another step down. Then you have like your tier 2 and 3 cities. So like Jaipur, India, or, you know, some city like Guangzhou in China or something like that. That's not exactly Shanghai. So that's kind of how you think about the locations. And the final obviously is like the regional. Like if you're in a truly rural or regional area, like the pay is going to be a lot less. So that's what we uncovered about compensation.
But there is also a bit in the post which did leave me kind of conflicted, where it warned against taking risky roles at early stage startups just to gain more scope. Now, aside from the old no risk, no reward cliche, don't some people just really like risky, scopeful roles, like maybe going to transformations and being the Winston Wolfe of product? I mean, it's not all about money, right? I mean, money's important, but it's not all about money. Is it okay to prioritize one over the other?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the only way you're going to succeed in a job is if you're excited about it, if you have that grass is greener approach about it. And so what I would emphasize personally is choose the job that you're really excited about and understand what chapter of life you're in. Are you in the maximizing income chapter of your life? Or are you in the maximizing work-life balance chapter of your life? Or are you in the maximizing mission? Because, you know, if you're going to go work for that climate tech startup, it's going to pay a lot less than these big tech hyper-growth companies that we're talking about. So there's so many different things that you could optimize for that I haven't even mentioned. So it's about creating sort of your own matrix. But we did interview a lot of recruiters and VCs for this piece, and they consistently emphasize that this is the most common mistake with VPs of product that they have worked with, is that VPs of product, or maybe they were a director of product at a big company, they want to go into a chief product officer role at a Series B company. They're doing that because they want more control. But actually, this is like the wrong thing to strive for, scope and control, because you'll find that the set of challenges you face are similar and just as tough. So you're not actually going to like reduce the challenges. You're not going to suddenly have decision-making power. But you are going to go into a role with much higher attrition, right? If you look at the attrition of a director of product at Google, you know, like 0.0001% of them are getting let go by Google. If you look at a VP of product at a hypergrowth startup, like 10% of them are being let go after a year. If you look at chief product officers at a Series A startup, like 45% of them are being let go after a year. These are just some numbers that one's recruiter threw out for me that I have sitting in front of me. So those are like what you'll see as the risk factor. And the added element of risk here is that your job search is taking longer in this market. Yes, there are some jobs available, but whereas before in your past, you know, you were able to find a job with 3 months, you can probably double that. It's going to take you 6 months now. So because of the state of the market, where it's heating up, but it's still not good, it's still not 2021. And so that's where a lot of people were saying, like, be cautious. Instead of going for more scope, it's actually usually better to go for a scope that you feel really comfortable you can master. And so the kind of the mistake is, A, I want more decision-making power, and I think that suddenly more scope is going to resolve that. It's not. And then B is you may not actually be as prepared as you think. And VPs of product, unfortunately, we're kind of chronically overconfident with our skills. And so just kind of being that, we just wanted to give a reality check in the article because we heard that from so many recruiters.
But that does then feed into this idea, and again, it's something that you say in the article, that many founders, maybe even most founders, believe that winners win. And that this is something that recruiters often hear from those founders as well. And they assume that someone that's been at a successful company during a growth phase will continue to win. But isn't there also the danger of survivorship bias there? Like, okay, yeah, great, they were there whilst that company did the things, but actually their role in that was fairly tangential, or they were kind of a passenger-ish, maybe not a full passenger, but they could have been, or that maybe they can only really work in that type of environment. And then if they end up going to a quite different type of environment, or maybe in a different space or something like that, that maybe they're going to struggle to make any impact at all. So isn't this kind of winners win type of mentality just an example of survivorship bias, and also maybe even hints of sort of big tech or unicorn-centric bias at play?
Yes, it is a big tech and unicorn-centric bias, because that is where the majority of product leadership roles that pay well exist. So those,
but that doesn't mean that they're good for the little company, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. Actually, I wouldn't say that this is good advice. Nothing in the article is good advice for a founder. It's really only good advice for the pragmatic VP of product, realizing how founders think. Because what the recruiters told us is that there were multiple candidates that they have put through the process, all received yeses on interviews. Founder okays it, founder puts it in front of the board, and the board overrules it. The board says, yeah, Jason, I haven't even heard the last 4 companies he worked at. I know somebody who works at Miro, and I can get them for you, and it'll cost you $250,000 more a year, but that's who I want you to take. And so that is extremely common at your venture-backed startups. Again, this is a bias towards venture-backed startups. So if you look then at your sort of bootstrapped companies, I honestly think these are the sexiest places to work right now, because your profitable bootstrapped company, like, they can afford you if they're hiring you. They actually know what the heck they're doing from a financials point of view. They're not burning cash just to increase their top line. So those are some of the sexiest places to work at. And I've actually had this strategy with a couple different people I've been coaching recently who just said, like, Aakash, I'm not getting laid off again. Screw that. I was killing myself at this job, and as far as I can understand it, I was doing the best job of my career up until that point, and they still let me go. I'm going to a profitable company. So a lot of these people even are going to like profitable PE-backed companies, because those companies have started rehiring again. And I would say that those companies, they have their own sets of pressures and challenges. So let's first talk about private equity, and then we'll talk about founders. So first, with private equity. Private equity is kind of like a venture capital board in that they love a fancy resume. You know who the biggest billable client for McKinsey is? It's private equity firms. So they love to hire McKinsey. They love to hire ex-Google. They love to hire ex-Meta. The other thing they love is somebody who has literally done the same job before. So if you, for instance, grew Miro, one of Miro's upstart competitors is Mural. They want to hire at VP of product for Mural was the VP of product at Miro, and they want them to just run the entire playbook that Miro ran. So that's what PE people care about. Finally, we get our bootstrap founders. I actually find that these people care the most about industry expertise. It's counterintuitive, but you can sometimes sell like a board even, that this guy was at Google, even though he was in Google Cloud and you're a consumer product. But if you want to sell like a founder, I find that like they will call bullshit if you haven't worked in their domain. So you might be able to get an up level where you go from director to CPO, but that's the problem. So I'd say like there's no world where you can't be pragmatic. You have to be pragmatic about whatever that group cares about.
Does feel like there's a lot of potential talent being left on the table, and for all of the risks that, especially with VCs, there's this kind of idea that they're going to take risks, right? They're going to be prepared to take a big swing, and they don't need all of their companies to succeed as long as one of them succeeds big, and all the cliches about that. But it feels like there's a certain lack of risk taking against the people for the people that maybe are going to be the ones that you actually need for that company. Maybe due to the mix of their skills and the things that they've worked on, the types of things that they've worked on, but that you're kind of leaving them, or you're kind of getting rid of them at phase one, simply because they don't have an impressive enough name on the CV, which is kind of a disappointing future in some ways, I guess.
Yeah, I think it is disappointing actually.
Because it kind of feels like you're going down one track or the other, right? Like you either go and work for some great companies and then you're on the great company track and then you're going to get to work for other great companies, or you're going to be working for a kind of crappy company and you're on the crappy company track now. So now all you get to do is work for other crappy companies. So it kind of feels like you can learn stuff from crappy companies, right? And there are things that you might not learn at amazing companies. And that's not to say that either of them, I mean, obviously by definition, a crappy company is less good than a great company. But like, there's so much around trying to hire the right person for the role that can actually do the job that you need them to do, rather than kind of getting starstruck or bedazzled by the fact that they, like you say, worked at Google Cloud when that's not what your product is. It just seems, I don't know, maybe just slightly short-sighted to me, but maybe that's why I'm not hiring for Google. Who knows?
I think that it probably is short-sighted. So the one thing is, I mentioned those boutique recruiting firms. So I heard from multiple of those boutique recruiting firms, the ones who are able to show a track record with the company that, maybe on their third or fourth role that they place, at the outset, they clarify with the company. They're like, hey, Amplitude, you're a public company, but you're only offering 40th percentile pay. So we cannot hire you the track record VP of product from Mixpanel or Heap. What we can do is we can find you somebody who's willing to do the work you need at this stage, somebody who's general purpose athlete who's ready, maybe somebody who has a lot of experience in product analytics, but didn't hold exactly this title before. So when you work with those boutique recruiting firms, if you're in that position where you want to go from bad company to good, for instance, I think that is easily the best way to do so. The other way to do so, which I mentioned, is the venture capitalist route. So if a venture capital is introing you to a founder, like the founder does reply and they do talk to you. So then it's on you. Can you prove to them that, usually what I recommend is that you're self-aware of your past. Like you're talking to the founder. Let's say, I was recently talking to the founder of Dovetail, right? So you're talking to Benjamin. You say like, Benjamin, I know you don't know shit about the last 4 companies that I worked for, but here's why I can help you. Did you know that the last 4 companies were customers of Dovetail? And I've been using your product for 5 years. And I have 100 lists of user feedback complaints, and I have a product strategy document written up for you that I'm going to review with you in this call. Then you can flip the table. So if you're stuck, find your route, usually through these boutique recruiting firms or a VC partner, and get an intro to the founder and flip the table. And what I mean by that, flip the table, is do 10 times more work than the fancy name guy. The fancy name guy, maybe he didn't get laid off. Maybe he's still at Google cranking away at 62-hour weeks. Great. He can't spend 4 hours every evening on this work product for the next week before his founder call, but you can. So why don't you have a 28-hour work product for him and show him just how awesome you are? So actually, multiple people have gotten jobs that way that I've talked to. And I think that it is a pyramid. We all know that there's way less VPs of product than directors, than group, than PMs. But it's still a growing field because tech is growing and engineers are growing and they need product managers once they hit a certain stage. That reality isn't changing yet. AI hasn't gotten anywhere where product managers don't exist. So because it's a growing field, if you want to hang tight, I think almost everybody listening 50 minutes into this podcast can find the job they want.
Well, fingers crossed. But before we go, I do want to take one actionable takeaway from this. Now, obviously, one of the actions that people could take is go and read your post about it, maybe even take up that free trial, maybe even subscribe to the newsletter. But if you had to give one key takeaway, piece of actionable advice to any product leader listening to this who's either in the middle of a job search or about to be in the middle of a job search, like what's the most important first step they can take?
Yeah, so we just talked about reaching out right now, but there's another component, which is inbound. And if you're a real product leader, you have been getting inbound. So optimize your inbound funnel. First things first, how many search appearances do you appear on LinkedIn? Set a goal to double that over the next, let's say, 3 months. And that is something you can do. And just start looking at, some of the LinkedIn influencers who post about the content, or I'll give you a couple basic tips right now. Number one is triple the length of each of your descriptions for each of your jobs. Number two is include more metrics than you were including before. Number three is to recast your entire profile so it looks more like a straight line. I know every single one of you guys has had a jagged career. You spent 6 years in e-commerce, and then you spent 6 years in fintech, and then you spent 3 years in B2B SaaS. But what do you want to do next? You want to do B2B SaaS? Perfect. Talk about how you have become a B2B SaaS product leader in your headline. Talk about how all of your experiences lead up to you becoming a good B2B SaaS leader in your About Me. Your headline and your About Me create a cohesive narrative, because what they want to do is, like a recruiter or a VC or even an in-house recruiter or an in-house hiring manager presenting to their skip level, is they want to say I found the unicorn. Skip level, my manager, I'm talking to my CEO about what director I want to hire, right? I want to say, dude, I found this guy who's been a director at the 4 companies you're jealous of. Let me tell you about him and how he is the best sales tech product leader there ever was. And so you want to be that person that they want to brag about. And so think about those 3 elements I just talked about: your headline, your About Me, and the detail in your experiences to create that for your target profile job. Because inbound is huge. Basically, every single recruiter will look at LinkedIn for the profile that they created with the company. They may not reach out to anybody. They may just only look at people from their network in the end, but they will at least do the search. So make sure you show up for the search. And then the second thing is, as you get those search results, what's your conversion rate? How much inbound are you getting? So use those 2 metrics, your search results and your conversion rate to actual inbound, to basically treat it like a product and improve your LinkedIn.
Well, there you go. Obviously, excellent advice, and plenty in the post as well, which I'll link to in the show notes. But after this, where can people find you if they want to check out your content, peruse your newsletter, or maybe even get some rock climbing tips?
Yes, I mainly talk about rock climbing if you reach out to me. So you can reach out to me if you want. And as we talked about at the beginning, even though I suck at it, I am in the end responsive. I might prioritize or triage your request, but I'll respond at some point, even if it's 3 months down the line. You can reach out to me and we'll get in touch. I'll figure out a piece that you could add value to. That's usually what my angle is, because I'm writing so many pieces. So I can talk to just about anybody. Reach out, tell me why I might want to talk to you, and we'll find some time. In terms of my life, we talked a little bit about how I'm just focused on this research. So the way this research manifests is the paid newsletter. And the paid newsletter is hosted on Substack. So if you're already subscribed to Lenny's, you can subscribe to mine. And I think most people underrate whether your company will be willing to pay for this. But here's what I'd do. Find one post that your skip level or your boss might get some value from, and just send that to them. And they'll just take the free trial themselves, and then they'll be sold. So that's how I think about it.
Well, there you go. Exactly as I would expect of someone who's trying to make money out of it would think about it. But obviously, I'll link that all into the show notes, and hopefully you'll get a few people that aren't in our minuscule intersection come across and take a little look and try and find out more. Well, that's been a fabulous chat. So obviously really grateful you could spend some of your valuable research time talking to some schmuck like me, but obviously we'll keep in touch. As for now, thanks for taking the time.
Of course. And yeah, anybody who's listened this far, I think you'll like the piece that Jason has been working on with me. I'm actually floored at the quality of his network and the people we are talking to. So yeah, I'm excited to share.